Welcome back to the deep dive. You know, sometimes the most fascinating deep dives come from the most unexpected places, and today is no exception.
Yeah, we're looking at a Reddit thread all about a husband dealing with a sudden separation.
Lots of raw emotion in this one.
And conflicting advice, too.
7 years in marriage, 3 kids, and poof, wife wants out.
It's like his whole world just exploded and he's turning to the internet for support.
That's rough. So what exactly happened? What led this guy to Reddit?
Well, he says his wife's decision to separate completely blindsided him.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and get this, she claims to have never really loved him.
Ouch. After 7 years and 3 kids, that's gotta sting.
Tell me about it. And to make matters worse, they're stuck living together because of finances.
Adding insult to injury, right?
Absolutely. It's a situation a lot of couples face these days, especially with the economy being what it is. It creates so much tension.
Yeah, you can't just get away from each other.
Right. It's an emotionally charged situation for sure.
And didn't he say that his wife is acting like they're best friends?
He did.
Still confiding in him, relying on him for support, even though she wants out of the marriage.
He actually said, she's acting like we are best friends. It's like she has all the benefits of being married to me with none of the negatives.
Wow.
That line really got to a lot of people who commented on the thread.
I can see why. It just perfectly captures that feeling of being used, doesn't it?
Exactly. Like he's still giving her all this emotional support, all this practical help, but she's checked out of the marriage.
It sounds like a lot of people saw that as a form of manipulation.
A lot of commenters did, whether she meant it that way or not. They were really urging him to set some serious boundaries.
I guess the Reddit community went into full-on protect this guy mode.
For sure. They were giving him tons of advice. Some of it was practical, some was more about his emotions, and some of it was, well, a little more out there.
Out there how?
We'll get to that. But first, let's talk about the practical advice. What were people suggesting he do? Pretty much everyone agreed that he needed to get a lawyer ASAP.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Like yesterday, they said. It was seen as the most important first step to protect himself legally.
Especially with things like assets and custody of the kids to think about.
Exactly. They warned him not to make any decisions without talking to a lawyer first.
So no matter how small the decision.
Right, because even small things could have big consequences later on.
It's like everybody on Reddit suddenly became legal experts.
Yeah, well, it shows you how vulnerable people feel when they're going through a separation.
Yeah, they just want someone to tell them what to do.
And to reassure them that they're doing the right thing.
So besides the lawyer stuff, was there any other advice people kept giving?
Oh yeah, tons of it. People were really emphasizing the importance of setting boundaries.
Emotional boundaries, you mean?
Exactly. They could see that he was still really attached to his wife, and they wanted him to stop confiding in her.
Stop being her shoulder to cry on, basically.
Exactly. They said it was crucial for him to be able to heal and move on.
Makes sense.
One commenter even said, "She is no longer your friend. You're about to find out how ugly she can be through legal proceedings."
Yikes. That's pretty harsh.
It is, but maybe he needed to hear it.
It definitely sounds like Reddit was on team protect yourself at all costs.
Which, I get, divorce can be brutal. It's only natural to want to protect yourself from more pain.
But didn't anyone say anything about self-care?
Oh yeah, that came up a lot too. Lots of people were encouraging him to focus on his physical and mental health.
Hit the gym, focus on yourself, that kind of thing.
Exactly. They were suggesting all kinds of healthy outlets for his emotions, exercise therapy, reconnecting with friends, hobbies.
You can be easy to let those things slide when your world feels like it's falling apart.
For sure. But that's exactly when you need them the most.
To keep yourself afloat.
Exactly. You have to take care of yourself, both for your own sake and for your kids if you have them.
Because you have to be strong for them.
It's all about finding that inner strength and resilience.
So all this advice from Reddit has been pretty tough love so far.
It has.
But wasn't there anyone who offered a different perspective?
There was.
Really?
Yeah, amidst all the calls for lawyers and boundaries, there was this smaller group of people who were advocating for a more compassionate approach.
Interesting. What were they saying?
Some of them were suggesting couples therapy.
To try and save the relationship.
Yeah, they thought it might help them figure out what went wrong.
That's a big step, though, when one person's already checked out.
It is. And others were really emphasizing the importance of co-parenting.
Finding a way to make things work for the kids even though the marriage is over.
Exactly. They said it's all about finding ways to communicate effectively even after the separation.
So you've got one group saying protect yourself at all costs, and another saying Try to work things out.
Exactly. And it just goes to show that there's no right answer when it comes to separation.
What works for one couple might not work for another.
Exactly. And that's what makes this whole deep dive so fascinating.
It's not about finding the one right answer,
Right. It's about exploring all the different opinions and approaches.
because relationships are complicated.
They are. And so is separation.
Speaking of complicated, let's talk about some of the more unconventional advice that this guy got.
Yes. The internet never fails to deliver when it comes to weird suggestions.
Like what?
Well, some people were encouraging him to use his wife's guilt against her in the divorce.
Really?
Yeah, like play hardball, try to get the upper hand.
Sounds like some people were ready to go to war.
Yeah, it definitely shows you how much anger and resentment can come up during a separation.
But like you said before, those kinds of tactics can backfire.
They can create even more conflict.
So it sounds like this guy got a whole buffet of advice.
He did.
Everything from lawyer up to play dirty to try and work things out.
To everything in between.
So what does it all tell us about separation? What have we learned from Reddit?
I think it shows you just how raw and messy separation can be.
Yeah, it's a roller coaster of emotions.
Heartbreak, confusion, anger.
And a desperate need for guidance,
Absolutely. People really turn to online communities for support.
even if the advice isn't always great.
Yeah, sometimes it's questionable, but it shows you how much people need to connect with others who understand what they're going through.
To feel like they're not alone.
Exactly. But it also shows you the limits of online advice.
How so?
Well, Reddit can be a great place to vent and get support.
And to see different perspectives.
Right, but it's not a replacement for professional help.
Like from a therapist or a lawyer.
Exactly. When you're dealing with something as complex as separation, you need expert guidance.
So we've talked about the initial shock, the scramble for legal advice, the emotional turmoil.
We have.
But this is just the beginning, right?
It is.
What happens next? How does this story unfold?
Look, that's what we'll be exploring in the next part of our deep dive.
We'll look at the long-term effects of separation, the challenges of co-parenting, and how people can heal and grow after something like this.
It's a long road, but there is light at the end of the tunnel.
So stay tuned as we continue this conversation. And in the meantime, we'd love to hear your thoughts.
What stood out to you most about this Reddit thread?
What resonated with you?
Share your insights in the comments below.
We always love hearing from you.
You know, as we were going through all that advice from Reddit, something really struck me.
What's that?
It's like this thread accidentally reveals a lot about how we think about marriage as a society.
Oh, I see what you mean. Like there's this assumption that a 7-year marriage with 3 kids should be saved no matter what.
Exactly. And while that might come from a good place, we have to remember that not all relationships are meant to last forever.
Sometimes letting go is actually the best thing for everyone.
Right. It's like trying to fit a square peg in a round hole.
Sometimes things just don't fit anymore.
Exactly. And I think it all ties into how relationships are changing these days.
Like the whole till death do us apart thing isn't always the goal anymore.
Right. People are putting more emphasis on personal growth and fulfillment these days.
So it's not just about sticking it out no matter what.
Exactly. It's about finding a partner who supports your growth.
A partner who helps you become the best version of yourself.
Exactly. And sometimes that means realizing that a relationship has run its course.
Even if it's painful.
Even if it means untangling a whole life you built together.
It's a tough pill to swallow for sure.
It is. But sometimes separation can be the thing that helps you grow.
And it ultimately leads to more happiness down the road.
Exactly. So how do we make sense of all this?
Yeah. How do we balance these changing ideas about relationships with the pain of separation?
I think it starts with understanding the psychology of separation.
What do you mean?
Well, it's a process of grieving.
You're grieving the loss of the relationship.
Right. But you're also grieving the loss of all those shared dreams.
The future you thought you had together.
Exactly. And even the identity you built as part of a couple.
It's like losing a part of yourself.
Exactly. And that loss needs to be acknowledged.
You need to allow yourself to grieve.
Exactly. And that's where all that self-care advice comes in.
Taking care of yourself both physically and emotionally.
Exactly. Giving yourself space to heal.
To figure out who you are outside of the relationship.
Right. And to rediscover yourself.
And that's where support comes in too.
No, absolutely.
Right?
From friends, family therapists.
Even online communities like the one we're talking about.
Exactly. You don't have to go through this alone.
Something else that really stood out to me in that Reddit thread was all the talk about communication.
Even after the separation.
Yeah. People were encouraging this guy to talk to his wife.
Which seems counterintuitive when you think about it.
Right. You're breaking up, so why keep talking?
Because communication is key when it comes to co-parenting.
Making sure the kids are okay.
Exactly, and it makes the whole transition smoother for everyone.
So it's not about being romantic partners anymore.
Right. It's about shifting to a different kind of partnership.
A co-parenting partnership.
Exactly. And that requires a whole new set of communication skills.
It's about setting clear boundaries and expectations.
Exactly, to avoid misunderstandings down the line.
So even though the relationship is over, communication becomes even more important.
In a different way.
That's so interesting. And that's where all that other advice comes in, right?
About separating finances and stuff.
Yeah, and creating physical space within the home.
Absolutely. It's all about setting up a clear framework for this new dynamic.
To minimize conflict and confusion.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which ultimately benefits the kids the most.
So what can we learn from all this? What are the big takeaways?
I think the biggest one is the importance of communication.
Throughout the whole relationship, not just during a separation.
Exactly. Talking about issues before they become huge problems.
It's like preventative maintenance for your relationship.
I love that analogy. And it's not just about communicating your own needs.
It's about listening to your partner's needs, too.
Exactly. And trying to understand where they're coming from.
Creating a space for open and honest dialogue.
Absolutely. And that brings us to another important point, self-awareness.
Knowing yourself, understanding your own needs.
Exactly. Understanding your patterns in relationships.
So you can choose partners who are a good fit.
Exactly. It's like having a blueprint for a healthy relationship.
I like that. And there's one more thing that really stuck with me from this Reddit thread.
What's that?
The idea that even in the midst of heartbreak, there's still hope.
For healing and growth.
Exactly. It might not be easy and it might take time.
But it's possible to come out of this stronger and more resilient.
It's a reminder that endings aren't always failures.
Sometimes they're opportunities for something new and better.
And sometimes letting go is the kindest thing you can do.
For yourself and for the other person.
It's about recognizing that sometimes people grow apart.
And that's okay.
This deep dive has really been a journey, hasn't it?
It has.
We started with this one guy's story on Reddit
And it's turned into a much bigger conversation.
about relationships, communications, self-awareness.
And the resilience of the human spirit.
It's been fascinating. So as we head into the final part of this deep dive,
I want to encourage you to think about your own experiences.
with separation in any form,
Romantic relationships, friendships, family dynamics.
what lessons have you learned?
How have those experiences shaped you?
Welcome back to the deep dive.
Oh.
We've been talking about this Reddit thread about a husband dealing with separation.
And it's really gotten us thinking about the long-term impact of these kinds of situations.
Yeah, we've talked about the initial shock, the legal stuff,
Yeah.
the emotional roller coaster.
But what happens after all that? What does life look like down the road?
Right, it's easy to get caught up in the immediate crisis, but the effects of separation ripple outward.
They affect everyone, kids, extended family, even friends.
Everyone has to adapt and adjust.
And that process looks different for everyone.
Of course, there's no one-size-fits-all experience.
For some people, separation might be a relief.
Like finally escaping a bad situation.
Exactly. But for others, it's devastating.
A huge loss.
A time of intense grief and uncertainty.
And for kids, it must be especially tough.
Definitely. Kids often don't understand why their parents are splitting up
They might blame themselves.
or feel caught in the middle.
Yeah, it's so important for parents to reassure their kids that it's not their fault.
Absolutely. And that they're still loved by both parents.
That brings us back to all that advice about co-parenting that we saw on Reddit.
It was a big theme for sure.
Sounds like co-parenting is a whole new challenge.
It is. It requires so much maturity from both parents.
You have to put your own feelings aside and focus on what's best for the kids.
Which isn't easy, especially when you're hurting.
No kidding. And it sounds like it takes a lot of communication, too.
Tons of it. You have to be on the same page about so many things.
Parenting styles, schedules, discipline, all of it.
Exactly. And you have to be willing to compromise,
To put the kids' needs first.
which can be so hard when you're still angry or resentful.
Definitely. It's a constant work in progress.
It is, but it's worth it for the kids.
And for your own peace of mind, too.
Holding on to anger just makes everything worse.
So that brings us to the question of what happens next.
Right. What does moving forward look like after a separation?
Can you actually be happy again?
Can you let go of the past and start a new chapter?
Those are big questions.
They are, but I believe the answer is yes.
You think people can find happiness after separation?
I do. I've seen it happen. Lots of people find that separation, even though it's painful, leads to positive change.
Like it forces you to grow and learn about yourself.
Exactly. You reevaluate your priorities, you rediscover your passions.
You create a life that's more true to who you are.
That's a great way to put it.
So it's not just about surviving the separation.
It's about thriving afterward.
Becoming a better version of yourself.
Exactly. And that's a powerful message for anyone going through something similar.
Whether they're considering separation or already in the middle of it.
It's a reminder that endings aren't always bad.
Sometimes there are opportunities for something new and amazing.
And sometimes letting go is the best thing you can do for yourself and the other person.
It's about giving each other the freedom to grow.
Even if it means growing in different directions.
This deep dive has really been a journey.
It has.
We started with this one guy's story on Reddit.
And we ended up talking about so much more.
The complexities of separation, the challenges of co-parenting, the potential for growth and healing.
It's been fascinating to explore all these different facets.
And ultimately, I think it's a message of hope.
Hope for healing, hope for a brighter future.
It's a reminder that even when things fall apart, you're not alone.
And you can come out of this stronger and wiser.
So thank you for joining us on this exploration of separation and its ripple effects.
We hope you found it insightful and maybe even a little bit inspiring.
And until next time, keep diving deep. Keep seeking the extraordinary in the ordinary.